Hi, I'm Ryder, and this is the second part in a series of what I'm calling conscious computing, where I review tech devices and their ability to help me live a better life. I do this by grading them against 5 criteria of the conscious computing scale. Each of these criteria exists on a scale from 0 to 10. The twist here is that they're dials. A 0 means that there's no technology, it's fully manual, and a 10 means that it's fully technological with little to no human intervention. Just to be clear, neither is inherently good or bad. It's about finding the right Goldilocks zone based on your individual needs. To learn more about the conscious computing scale, watch the previous video in the series. But here's a quick rundown. 1 is input. This style is about taking information and putting it in your mind. Then 2 is throughput. This style is about how easy it is to make that information usable, so usability. And 3 is Stayput. This style is about having everything you need to stay focused on what matters. 4 is compute. This style determines how much of the thinking and work is done by you versus for you. And then 5, output. This style is about how closely your results match your intentions. In this video, we'll be mostly focusing on inputs, which may be the most critical dial of them all when it comes to computing more consciously and leading a better life, because the quality of the information we input into our systems affects every other part. It affects our relationships, our thinking, our behavior. To that end, I will be reviewing the Onyx Boox Palma. It's an interesting device that may fill a phone-shaped hole in our daily lives and help us separate the signal from the noise. Let's dive in. Okay, so before I get into this review, I want to take a moment to explain why I even bought this gadget. I did buy it. The Boox Palma is not a phone. You can't make calls on it. It's more like a Kindle on steroids. It's a phone-sized e-ink tablet that runs the Google Play Store. That means that you can download almost any app that you could on any other Android device, but you just won't want to. Why? Because it's just not fun. And that may be its biggest feature. Let me explain. A core concept of conscious computing is defining what you want to do first, then finding a device that supports that intention. Maybe it's to learn about finances or publish a newsletter about breathwork. This is critical because without an intention, you'll have little to no defenses to all the shiny features and apps on our devices that will distract you. Nowhere is that more true than content sources or inputs. The promise of the internet was that we could have access to unlimited information. But in truth, it turns out it's the other way around. We live in an age where information has unlimited access to us. Whether it be in the classroom, the boardroom, the bedroom, even the bathroom, we're subjected to never-ending feeds of information, and we simply can't handle it. Back in the day, every village would deal with local problems. Maybe a border dispute in one village, a famine in another, or a plague. Our brains and nervous systems evolved over hundreds of generations to be able to process problems at this scale. You knew everyone. The issues were local, material, actionable, and temporary. Now we live in an age where we are exposed to a news cycle feeding us every horror in the entire world 24/7. Most of which are completely beyond our influence, control, or capacity. We're giving alarming information all the time we can't really do anything about. It paints the world as a much scarier place than it is, and then we distract ourselves with the brain rot served up by social media. This flood of information reliably leaves us feeling anxious and depressed and hopeless, outraged, or even empty. What's even creepier is that we didn't consent to most of this information, right? It's just served up to us by algorithms that are finely tuned to maximize engagement for profit. Our phones are hyper-engineered to make these feeds as compelling as possible. The designers of these devices openly admit to exploiting our psychological vulnerabilities to monetize our attention. And a big part of this is making access to information seamless. There are plenty of apps out there that try to fix this problem and limit how much time we spend on distracting feeds. But when you look at it honestly, they're subject to our willpower, which is super limited. With just a few taps, we can easily diffuse them and get back on TikTok. Yes, software plays a major role in this problem, but I think for a real solution, we have to swim further upstream. The devices we consume our content on themselves. This is where the Boox Palma comes into play. So my intention was to find a way to read more, to be able to aggregate all the things that interested me into one distraction-free place. Let's see how the Boox Palma held up to that intention. Okay, let's start with inputs. Again, taking information and putting it into your mind. The Boox Palma is an interesting device because it looks and feels like a phone, but it's not. It only can connect via Wi-Fi. This may not seem like a big deal, but it actually has had a really tangible impact on the way that I used it. It forced me to be very intentional about the content that I uploaded to it before I left the house. Though you can download browsers and social media apps and pretty much anything you can think of, the e-ink screen makes those experiences very unsatisfying, if not frustrating. So I simply didn't use them. What is so satisfying that it's almost rewarding is listening to podcasts and books. Because of this, the only apps that I ended up using much more closely aligned with my intention of learning. The effect is that I have a much higher value input pipeline than I would have if I wasn't using the Palma. For this reason, I give the Palma a 5 because it achieves this perfect balance between friction and access. I get exactly what I want when I want it and not much more. I could if I wanted to though. Next, let's talk about Throughput. This dial is about how easy it is to make use of that information that you're inputting. Aside from capturing a short note here or there, entering and organizing information on the Palma is fine. It takes over a minute to start up when turned off, which is a deal breaker for quick idea capture. But you can turn that feature off at the expense of battery life, which I did. It also has a camera on the back, but that's for scanning documents. Overall, there are just many features that are there if you need them, but chances are you just won't. That's not really what it's for. This is mainly due to the e-ink display. Navigating interfaces is much slower and muddier than on modern smartphone screens. It's certainly doable, but it becomes tedious pretty quickly. Again, for me, this is a feature and not a bug. Where the Palma shines for me is as a consumption device. I mainly use the Palma with the Kindle app, the Readwise Reader app, and the Snipped podcast app. Using the Palma to listen to music and podcasts is a nostalgic experience. It harkens back to the iPod days where you had to be much more discerning and intentional about what you listened to. So it's like creating a little mixtape for your future self, and I love that. And when I forgot to do it, I just had nothing to listen to, which ended up being a good thing. Speaking of listening, it doesn't have a headphone jack, but it does feature Bluetooth, so I was able to hook up my AirPods with no problem. The Snipped app on the e-ink, though, is very hard to navigate as it only has dark mode, and dark mode is generally not great on e-ink devices. When it comes to reading, though, the e-ink screen becomes a real joy to use. It uses physical particles to create the text, so it feels almost tangible, like the text is printed on paper. Because of this, you can read in direct sunlight. Pair that with the matte screen and there's no reflection, so it encourages a lot more outdoor reading, which is a delightful bonus. The screen is also sharp and has high contrast, and when you need it, there's a warm backlight which won't strain your eyes in the dark. It also features a touchscreen, which makes highlighting passages easy, which is something I do a lot. Physically, it hits a familiar sweet spot. It's very plasticky, so it doesn't feel high-end, but it's the shape of a large phone, just much thinner and much lighter with a well-textured back. All of this comes together to make holding the device one-handed for me easy for longer periods of time. Additionally, you can also set up the volume toggle on the side to flip or scroll pages, which makes navigating your books and articles a real pleasure. And that's what I'm doing on this thing most of the time. The size also makes it easy to slip into my pocket. So now I usually throw my iPhone into my bag and keep the Palma in my pocket. Because of this, I ended up reading way more, which was the whole point for buying this device. With all that said, I rate the Throughput as a 3 because everything feels very manual, and for something that you're reading on, that's fine. Next, let's talk about Stayput. This is the dial about having everything you need to stay focused. The Palma offers a nice balance here because I can access all my books, articles, and newsletters on one device. Because the ink display features no colors and animations experience ghosting, videos and social media are just not fun to consume. Same is true for navigating the web. Pair this with Wi-Fi only access and the Palma passively discourages anything but reading and listening. Those two are much better experiences than all other things. With that said, it is also a fully featured Android device. I must have spent a few hours over the course of this review dialing in the device itself through settings. I also kept on downloading and deleting apps to make it more minimal. Yes, the irony about that is not lost on me. Old habits die hard. Because of this, I give it a 7. It's not as easy to stay put due to the abundance of potential options that you have at your fingertips. Yes, I read way more in general, but I read way less per session than I would have if I only brought a Kindle. Next, let's talk about computing. How much of the processing and computing or the work is this thing doing for me? When I first got this and I realized that I could install Obsidian or Notion, I thought it might be a great way to take notes or maybe do some light computing. It soon became clear that for this, it wasn't great. First of all, because both of those apps don't have great mobile experiences. And secondly, we have the e-ink display, so switching quickly between screens becomes slow and tedious. With that said, for me, this is a device that does not serve to process thoughts, but to have them. It's a powerful e-reader, and to that end, it's great. It really does very little of the thinking for me, which when I'm reading to learn is exactly what I'm looking for. In short, this device is focused on input, not compute. So in terms of compute, I give the Palma like a 2 or a 3 because it does very little computing for me. It makes me use my mind, and that's exactly what I want. So the last dial is output, and again, this dial is about how closely my results matched my intentions. And when it comes to the Palma, the results matched my intentions pretty intensely. The Palma made it very easy to read, so I did a lot more of that. I replaced my phone in many places, though not fully. That's a topic for a different video. And also, it integrated into my PKM stack, so I was able to automatically catalog all of my reading highlights on the back end, so it made my reading significantly more effective. Because of this, I give the Boox a 6, a 7, because it had just enough technology to help me get high quality content, even though it did border on offering me so much technology that it started to become a little bit distracting, and I started messing around with the settings and downloading apps and all that stuff. But overall, I was really happy with the output of the Palma. It made me a much more consistent reader. The Boox Palma challenged me to consider how badly I want to distract myself. I can go on YouTube, I can go on Instagram, I can futz with Notion, and sometimes I did, but it simply just wasn't fun. Over time, I just kept removing apps until I was left with the ones that really aligned with my intention. So who would I recommend the Palma for? I think somebody like me who reads ebooks and newsletters and articles and wants them served up in a tidy little no-frills package, which is exactly what you want from a reading experience. It makes distractions hard and it makes the core content very enjoyable. Because I was able to read more, this device reminded me that even in this day and age of terrible misinformation and brain rot content, there are still incredibly skillful and thoughtful content creators out there whose work adds real value to my life and personal evolution. These incredible inputs are out there to be gathered, explored, and appreciated. And all I have to do is be intentional and vigilant about filtering out the noise. And the Boox Palma, I think, was a really powerful step in that direction. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Thank you for taking the time, and I will see you in the next one.